Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Okay, Mr. Schiff, I think it's important, since we've got plenty of time with you today, and we're thankful for that. Tell us a little bit about yourself, some of the predictions and projections, forecasts you've made accurately. I think it's important to recap those. I could go over some of them, but you could do it better than I because you made them. And then, so people take seriously what you're saying, let's move forward then into your forecast on the Depression and exactly why that's being exacerbated and accelerated by the policies, like a $50-something million bailout they're talking about for the auto industry, so Ford and Chevy and others can move to Brazil. Peter Schiff.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, I've been pointing out for a number of years the problems, the underlying problems with our economy, and what we're experiencing now is not the problem. What we're finally experiencing are the consequences of the problem. And the problem has been building, as I said, for years and years. And basically, the roots of the problem, you can probably trace them back to abandoning the gold standard in 1971, because when we took the dollar off the gold standard and the world continued to accept the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency as if it were still backed by gold, that put us in a unique position as a nation where we could pay for our imports by printing money. We didn't have to pay for our imports with exports, and we didn't have to pay for them with gold. We could just print money. And that really started this process that culminated, after the dot-coms, I think, from 2001, 2002 until 2008. We basically went through the mania of the blow-off stage of this phony economy. But what happened is we began to deindustrialize, and we began to move into a service sector economy because we were able to import all the things that we didn't produce by printing money and sending it abroad. And our creditors were willing to hang on to the money we printed. And they didn't look to actually spend it on real stuff. And so the economy began to evolve, this consumer-based economy. But in order to keep it growing, we had to keep on taking on ever-increasing quantities of debt, which the world was willing to supply us. And, of course, with the housing bubble, which when I was very critical there, that's what enabled Americans to borrow money on an unprecedented scale. I mean, we raised it, to an art form where we were borrowing, literally trillions of dollars from the world, and we were just blowing it all on massive consumption. And our trade deficit, during this decade, went from, what used to be a pretty bad, 10, 12 billion a month up to 60 billion, 70 billion a month. And, this was completely unsustainable. And then, you had, half of the income from the S&P 500 was being generated from financial services. And it was all an illusion. And I saw all the risks that were being taken on Wall Street and all the speculation on Main Street. I knew that our whole banking system was a house of cards because I knew that the assets were phony because the assets were mortgages. And I knew that the people who were borrowing money, there's no way they could pay it back.
Sorry to interrupt you. Your voice is so strong. Will you back off your phone?
Oh, okay, sure.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. Absolutely. And then on top of that, the big banks and brokerage firms then took the security-backed assets, the mortgage loans, and sold those as basically good as gold.
Well, they had to sell them because we don't have any savings. I mean, this whole securitization process was a way to put together American borrowers with all the world's savers. I mean, you can only borrow money from somebody who saved it. And so this process enabled Wall Street to put the Japanese and the Chinese together with the Americans. But all we were doing was borrowing money. And, the Chinese, and, they were dumb enough to lend it to us. They thought they were going to get it back. But, they're not going to get it back because we spent the money. We have no way of paying it back. It wasn't put to a productive use. It was spent. But anyway, so I knew that this was going to end badly. This phony credit bubbled economy based on consumer spending and debt was going to collapse, and that's what's begun. Now, when I was warning about it, I was more fearful not of the collapse, but of the things that the government would do to try to interfere with the collapse, to try to reflate the bubble, to try to return us to the consumer spending economy that is the source of our problems. And that is exactly what the government is trying to do. And in so doing, what they're really doing is pouring gasoline on a raging fire, and it is going to, basically engulf the entire country and burn it to the ground. And every time the fire gets bigger, they're going to pour more gasoline on it. What we need, the only way that America is going to get back on the right track, is to have consumers stop spending. We need to rebuild savings. We need capital to be made available to business, not government, so that business can use it to produce the factories of the future, to employ the workers that are losing their jobs in services and finance. We need to allow the free market to work, and it's going to involve a lot of pain, because all this artificial living, all this living beyond our means and indulging our every whim and buying things we can't afford, that's got to come to an end. And it's not going to be an easy process. And during the process, asset prices are going to be marked down. Stock prices need to go lower. Real estate prices need to go lower. That's not going to sit well with a lot of people who thought they were going to get rich on asset appreciation, but we need to go back to reality. But what the government is going to do is they're going to prevent all this from happening. They're going to prevent us from getting out of this hole. They're going to dig it deeper. They're trying to encourage more reckless consumption. The entire purpose of the stimulus package and all the bailouts is to keep Americans going to the mall, to keep us reaching for our charge cards, buying more stuff. They want us borrowing more money to buy more houses. They want us borrowing more money to buy more cars. That is the exact opposite of what we need to do. And what they are setting up is the real crisis that I've been warning about. It's going to be a collapse in the value of the dollar. It's coming soon. And when the dollar collapses, you're going to see interest rates spiral out of control. You're going to see consumer prices spiraling out of control. And then we're going to be in a real crisis. Because, see, right now, the government is bailing everybody out and easing the pain. But when the bond market collapses, it's the U.S. government that's going to need a bailout, and there's nobody big enough to do it.
Peter Schiff, what is the time frame? I know these are liquid and move back and forth, but most of the experts we talk to, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts and Bob Chapman and the head of the Newark Business School and countless others, say that what government is doing is accelerating the time frame and bringing the total collapse, what I call hyper-stagflation, closer to reality.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's hard to say, exactly timing. I mean, timing is a very difficult thing to do, especially when there's so much irrationality in the world, and there's so much manipulation. There's so many people with vested interests, so you can never know the timing. Look, we had this huge dollar rally in 2008 that bought us a lot of time. I didn't anticipate that we'd have that big dollar rally. Maybe in hindsight, it's something I should have anticipated, because in the short run, it seems like the opposite of what should happen always happens, because the majority of people seem to always get it wrong, and they do the wrong thing, when they initially are confronted with information. But once this dollar rally really loses steam and begins to fall apart, it's going to take on a lot of momentum.
And that's
now,
starting
we can
to
already
happen.
See what's happening. Yeah, look at the bond market. I mean, the bond market has been dropping every day this year. In fact, so far, 2009 is the worst year in history for the U.S. bond market. It's the worst year, even though we've only finished 1 month of the year. And if this continues, this could be the beginning of the unraveling.
And the worst year in stocks ever.
Well, it's the worst January in stocks ever, yes. But it's not the worst year. But it's already the worst year in bonds. I mean, January was worse than any entire year that preceded it. That's how bad it was.
Okay, so what's the furthest it could be pushed out until, the layoffs, hundreds of thousands a month, the store shutdowns, and now the bubble in the real estate market is starting to implode. The credit card debt is starting to implode. As all these things combined with the already circling black hole, a year till it's riots in the streets, 2 years?
I don't know. I've talked about the potential for riots, and I think that exists, and looting, and I think what would cause that would be shortages of food and blackouts, and I think that it is possible that we will see that because the government is unleashing massive inflation. And ultimately, the inflation that they're creating is going to cause surging prices, particularly for things like food and energy. And if the government is going to stick to form, They are going to attack the symptoms and not the disease, which is the rising prices. And the only way governments ever attack rising prices is through price controls, which is what we did in the 1970s. And since we're repeating all the mistakes of the 1930s, I'm sure we'll repeat the mistakes of the 1970s. And if we have price controls, we're going to have shortages. And if we have shortages, we're going to have problems. We're going to have crime. And, of course, I think it's going to come at a time, where the cities are not going to have the money and the resources to pay for additional police protection. If not, they might have to cut back on the police protection they have now. And obviously, the criminals will figure that out.